Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.
Hey, thanks for joining us for another edition of Donnybrook. Great to have you aboard. We have a special guest joining us for the second half. We'll tell you who that is right now. And we have an esteemed panel discussing the issues of the week for the St. Louis region, starting with the news director for the Big 550 KTRS. She's Wendy Wiese, along with the birthday boy himself, Bill McClellan, who is blowing out the candles after dinner tonight. Happy birthday, Bill. Also, Ray Hartmann from the Riverfront Times and the Big 550 KTRS. Plus, Alvin Reid from the St. Louis American, 590 AM and 97.1 FM. And before this hour is over, we'll check in with the voice of the Cardinals, Mike Shannon, who's going to be on Donnybrook Part 2. We'll put him on the hot seat on this, the eve before the season opener. Well, Bill, congratulations. Many happy returns. You get younger every time we see you. And I hope the gift from the four of us arrived, and I hope you enjoy it in good health.
Well, it hasn't come in yet.
Oh, really? Darn. Those couriers, they're just not like they used to be.
Not trustworthy at all.
Although I thought last night's debate among the Democratic candidates for county executive, as seen on the 9 Network, was very interesting. And I hope our viewers did too. Bill, you saw Mark Mantovani and Jake Zimmerman, as well as the county executive, Sam Page and Jamie Tolliver. What did you make of last night's debate?
Well, I thought it was one of those debates where everybody looked pretty good. I had never heard Jamie Tolliver, and I thought she did well. But I thought that the winner, if we're going to have a winner in the debate, was Sam Page. And partially because I had heard so much about Mark Mantovani, mainly from my fellow panelists, that I was expecting him to do better than he did. I thought that he got a real blow in at Jake Zimmerman, where he talked about how Jake Zimmerman said that the Deerdorf Centene thing was a wake-up call, and Mantovani said, maybe to you, but we already knew it was a bad situation. But overall, I thought Sam Page handled himself well, and I was happy to see it because, as you guys know, I'm rooting for Sam Page because he employs a good friend of mine. And you know, it's a reason to vote for somebody, but why not? So I was thrilled to see Sam Page do well.
That's as good a reason as any, I suppose, Bill. And I agree with your assessment. I think Sam Page, his almost, I mean, he is so low key when he is speaking before the public that sometimes you wonder if he have a pulse. I mean, he is that low key, but that, I think that was a real benefit to him last night. I think Mark Mantovani, he had a couple of zingers. He also nailed Jake Zimmerman with when Jake Zimmerman accused everybody else of sniping, of partisan sniping and political sniping. And Mark Mantovani jumped on that and made quite a meal of it when he said, nobody snipes as much as Jake Zimmerman. But Sam Page definitely looked like a grown-up. He definitely looked like he had been there before. And I think if Mark Mantovani's campaign can, just settle him down a little bit and get him to focus on his message clearly, then I think we're going to really have an interesting race. I thought Jamie did a great job. I thought Jamie did a great job. I wanted to credit her with emphasizing textbooks instead of technology. I thought that was a great point when it came to pandemic back to school.
I thought, first of all, I really thought it was well-produced debate, and the question was really good. And, just the producer, I think, was terrific, the director. But seriously, all the questions were much better than we usually see in local debates. And Ruth and everybody just did a great job. I thought it's like watching sometimes like the presidential where you're kind of informed by what you think of the candidates going in, maybe a little bit. I don't think there was a real there was definitely not a clear winner or a clear loser. I personally thought probably Jake was the most polished debater type, I thought, of the group. I just think it depends. I don't agree that Sam was any clear winner. I mean, I don't think he's particular, but obviously I'm not a fan of his. So I think that informs a lot of what you think going in.
I agree. The call newspapers that cover, most of South County up to Mid County, they declared Mantovani the absolute supreme winner. I think that's because they want him to win. I'm anxious to see who the St. Louis American endorses. That'll be next Thursday, and that will be the last Thursday before the election itself, I guess. My guess is they'll probably endorse Sam Page. I don't know that. That's kind of my guess. So they probably saw it a little differently than all the rest of us did. But I do agree with you, Ray, in that I really don't think that there was like a clear winner, in that basically everyone answered the questions as they kind of saw fit, and there weren't any real gaffes. Like I thought, like I said, Jake Zimmerman launched the first attack ad of all the candidates. So if you do that first, then I don't think you can, question anybody else's motive after.
Here's what I think, guys. I think it's coming down to this, though. Ray, if I could just jump in really briefly. Dr. Sam Page has a very good chance, I believe, of getting elected because of COVID-19. And I think a lot of people are going to say that's an important issue to us. And apparently it is a big issue because Ann Wagner is now running on that in her commercials. And when I got a call at the home from the Page campaign, what they asked me, they said, is everything okay in your household with regard to COVID-19? And I think just unconsciously, people, even though St. Louis County does not have a very good COVID-19 record, I mean, we have many more, we have 55% of the deaths in a state where St. Louis County is 16% of the population. I think this is really going to help them.
Well, I can't argue with that, Charlie, but I'm just saying that, one, it's a different atmosphere than it has been, I think, in past elections. Two, I'm still one of those that is still thinking back 2, 3, 4 years. And I still think there's a lot of people out there that feel as though Sam Page is still part of that whole scene that we are trying to get away from.
Charlie, that was the point that Mark Mantovani made rather brilliantly, that Jake Zimmerman and Sam Page have been the ones responsible for where we are right now.
Well, see, I think Mantovani's strongest moment was early, and because he's talking to business people and the community. He had that line about the dimmer switch instead of the on and off light was a really good line. He used it a couple of times. And I think he was, I wouldn't discount, I don't think there's some big loss to Mantovani. As I say, I thought Jake was just the most natural in that setting. Talk about leadership, I thought he did well. But Mantovani was speaking very clearly to moderates and so forth. And I think that's an important part.
And to Republicans also, because a lot of Republicans, the only thing they have to go out and do is get a Democratic ballot and, vote.
I'll say this. SLU came out with a study, and it said that in Missouri, people are upset with the president. They're upset with the governor, but they like the job that local officials have been doing. And if that's the case, I think Page has an advantage there. Now, speaking of local officials, Alvin Reid, the mayor of St. Louis, Lyda Crewson, came out and said, thanks, but no thanks to President Trump or any federal official who's thinking about sending federal troops or federal officers to St. Louis to help combat crime or perhaps civil unrest. We've seen federal troops have been in Portland. They're being sent to Kansas City. They're being sent to Chicago. Do you think, given the crime problem we have in St. Louis, that the mayor should welcome support from the federal government?
If I may, Charlie, real quick, a good classmate of mine, Glennie Stanford, passed away, 60 years old, too early, class of 78. I just wanted to, acknowledge that. We're close, and we're going to miss you. So,
sorry to hear that.
If they tell the federal folk, like we like to say in St. Louis, you can't come south of Del Mar because, hey, you want to crime, violence, murders. I know exactly where to send you. So you don't need to be in the Central West End, and you don't need to be where protesters are. The police can handle that. They'll hang out up there and help us up there. And they don't want any part of that because all they're here is to tear gas and beat up and intimidate people that, for the most part, are peacefully protesting. So, yeah, if you come, we got some streets for you.
Well, I think in Kansas City and Chicago, Alvin, they are being designated to fight homicide. And if that was the case here,
let's just make sure that continues that way, because they're not fighting homicide in Portland. You know,
no, they're fighting CHOP or whatever's left of CHOP.
Charlie, to me, the very first criteria has to be if they are not welcomed by a mayor like Lyda Krewson, and good for her in this case, then the end of this discussion. The idea that the federal government, everybody always roll their eyes at me when I talk about Donald Trump's authoritarian instincts. Just look at them on display in Portland, Oregon right now. The idea that this guy thinks he can, above the objections of state and local officials, send in the equivalent of federal stormtroopers is a very frightening thing.
They burned down buildings. They went after the federal building,
It's a very bad idea.
In Chicago, in my hometown in 1968, when Mayor Daley famously said that the police aren't here to create disorder, they're here to preserve disorder. And that's what Trump is trying to do.
Yes.
He's trying to rile things up. And he's sending in those federales not to calm things down, but to stir it up and create trouble. And if I was the mayor, I'd say, we don't want any part of you.
Well, don't forget.
It does seem to be a campaign strategy.
We sent federal troops in. No, we sent federal troops to Mississippi to integrate the schools with James Meredith.
Charlie, now come on.
Charlie,
don't you dare compare what went on there.
No, what is wrong with sending
that's totally different.
And Mississippi did not welcome those federal troops from John F. Kennedy.
Okay. To compare those two things is ludicrous and somewhat.
Alvin, we have a homicide problem, in case you haven't noticed, and it's not getting any better. It's getting worse.
They're not trying to solve homicides in Portland. They're out there to fight with the protesters.
But they are in Chicago. That's the whole idea.
I don't think it's
Charlie, if I may, to compare the federal government standing up for the rights of American citizens, which is what they were doing above the objections of certain southern states, to compare that with really illegally bringing in, we have a very clear long history about keeping the military out of civilian affairs. It's just such an really outrageous comparison.
Well, of course, the Border Patrol and ICE are not the military, but let's move on.
The point is,
don't tell them that.
Wendy Wiese, I want to ask you about youth sports in the county. Last week, Dr. Sam Page, the county executive, said that we'd be going back to level 1. That means no games, no tournaments, and no practices with more than 10 kids playing. And then some of the top pediatricians in the area, including WashU's Jason Newland, said, hey, the data doesn't support that. Kids aren't coming down with coronavirus and they're not spreading it. And the problem of coronavirus in our area does not involve youth sports. So who's right here?
Well, it's interesting because when Dr. Sam Page had the press conference to announce this, I was even stunned and looked at my notes about 3 or 4 times because I thought, did I miss another story in which they had conclusively figured out that the spike was tied to the youth sports? Because he said, we know that it is because of youth sports. Definitively, that was it. And they seem to be backtracking a little bit. There are 300 contact tracers in the county, and apparently this was something that was seen as a disturbing trend. I don't know scientifically if a disturbing trend means that suddenly we have pinpointed the cause for the increase. But I know the parents are furious. And, honestly, I continue to say that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I mean, I think that if we slow down a little bit, then we're going to be better off for it.
I don't know. Who was it in a debate made the point? It might have been Jake, or I can't remember, that this didn't seem to be a collaborative decision with the pediatric community. Was it Jake? Somebody pointed that out.
It was Jake Zimmerman.
Well, the sports pandemic task force has said that they're not getting information from the county executive.
And that to me, and again, I don't want to spend the whole night beating up. Well, actually, I wouldn't mind, but I'm not going to.
Today he has everybody on board.
But I got to tell you, and I'm generally in favor of going slow. I thought the country should shut completely down as a country for 6 weeks when the health officials said so. But it doesn't feel like they're necessarily following the science here. I mean, I'm normally for shutting everything down if we need to, like you say, take extra precaution. But if it's particularly if it's outdoor sports, it seems like our priorities are, I don't know. I just didn't feel like the way it was handled. From the way I've talked to pediatricians talking about how important it is for kids to be active and getting out and exercising, it's just hard to imagine they couldn't social distance and still be able to not have a blanket ban on youth sports.
Look, I'm sorry. Let me tell you where this is coming from a bunch of wannabe Tony La Russas and Bill Belichick's and parents who think their son is going to be the next Dan Musial or their daughter's going to be on the U.S. Olympic softball team or play for the women's national team. If you had to tell kids, look, there'll be no sports until at least October. You think anybody's really going to just collapse, not be healthy? Before I ever put a uniform on, I played baseball every day, and I played football down at the playground. Kids don't do that anymore. They're on traveling teams and elite teams and this team and that team. And you know where they end up? Either going to college or working in a store someplace, because 99.5% of all American youth never play a professional sport and don't play it in college. This is just nonsense. This is people living out their dreams through their kids, and it's unacceptable.
Alvin, I think it's about kids who want to exercise and play sports.
You can't exercise? You can't exercise?
I think Alvin is completely right that it ought to go to sandlot days where the kids are out there and it's just kids playing. The problem with youth sports and the virus right now is all the parents have to be there. And I was like that myself, love to go to the games, but if the kids just go out to the playground and get in pickup games themselves, nobody's going to stop that.
Right. Exactly.
But you guys, I mean, there is, and I know that you're not on social media, there is absolute palpable rage, though, that is simmering on the part of many of these parents who have, they've got like the split screen with, our kids can't play this sport or that sport, but Black Lives Matter can protest shoulder to shoulder. And I'm just saying that is what is out there, and that is what is behind this. That the government
I understand that, but see, that's making an argument not on behalf of your kids, but on behalf of yourself. Okay? If you're 11 years old and your parents tell you there ain't going to be no baseball this summer, it's done. It's over. The people that are out there arguing are people living some kind of dream, and the whole Black Lives Matter, who are adults for the most part, all right, that's just trying to make an argument out of nothing.
Well, I'll tell you what, guys.
The government seems to be picking and choosing.
I'm not, okay.
I mean, how can you have bars open but not youth sports, especially when the coronavirus cases are peaking among the 20-somethings and not the kids who are between 0 and 9? In fact,
I understand that, but and I don't know if we're going to talk about this. So you're with the governor who said, send them all to school and they'll all get sick and that'll be good. I want them to get sick. I want them to get ill. Right. I mean, this is craziness.
It's not that crazy. I'll tell you why. NBC Sports, not NBC Sports, NBC News interviewed 5 pediatricians, esteemed pediatricians from around the country. This was just last week, and they said, should kids be going back to school? And everyone said yes, because the kids aren't contracting it and they're not spreading it. And then each pediatrician was asked, would you send your kids to school? And everyone, without hesitation, immediately said yes. So it's not just partisan.
I thought the county health department numbers, Charlie, were 10 to 19 and 19 to 29. I thought that was where.
Take a look at the graph on the county website. It's very low. The 10 to 19 is lower than the 20-somethings. It's lower than every other demo except for the 0 to 9.
Can I clarify something, please? Charlie, can I please? First of all, I am not in the group that Wendy was describing that was like mad online and anti-mask, all this. All I was saying was that in terms of a blanket ban on outdoor sports, I thought, I'm the last person. I ain't a stage door dad. Doesn't affect me at all. My point was, I didn't feel right around the time that we're at least having some of the kids apparently going back to school. And from what I saw, which I think everything's different. We talked last week about how it's got to be handled case by case. I thought a ban on, I just thought that there could be a middle, maybe to use Mantovani's thing, sort of a middle ground on social distancing at outdoor sports is all I was saying.
Sure.
I'm not arguing that, some argument about, I happen to think there needs to be a mask or a mask requirement. I think it should be statewide. And so somebody made a point. We didn't talk about it enough, but that I guess Alvin did. What Parson said was so outrageous and so talk about playing to the base. This idea that it's tough, the kids are going to go.
Well, it didn't go over well with the base, Ray, because he has been backpedaling since he said it.
He should have.
I know. I agree.
I ain't even saying that. God,
okay.
Horrible.
Hey, Bill McClellan. This week, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch did endorse Jeffrey Boyd, the alderman, over the incumbent Tashara Jones, the treasurer, in the primary race in the city of St. Louis, August the 4th. Among other things, the Post-Dispatch says they don't like the fact that she gave a contract to her largest contributor. Well, what do you know about this endorsement? What's behind it?
Well, I know nothing about it, except the Post-Dispatch has had a number of stories critical of Tashara Jones. And she wrote a very interesting open letter to the Post-Dispatch that was published in the St. Louis American. And I enjoy this kind of stuff. I enjoy when a politician is fighting with the newspaper. And I think it's good. And, and I'm a critic of Tashara Jones only in that, like, people before her, when she was running for the office, she was in favor of, there shouldn't be this huge slush fund for the treasurer from all the parking money. And like the people before her, as soon as she gets in, she realizes how important it is for the treasurer's office to have millions of dollars. And I think that's ridiculous. The city desperately needs money, and the parking money ought to go to the city.
Well, in the editorial, they were saying because former comptroller Burbis Jones is her dad, and he writes and helps on the editorial board of the St. Louis American. People don't, criticize her because for fearful of what would be written in the American. Well, if people, were that fearful of the American, Tashara Jones would be the mayor right now, because you had 4 other, maybe 5 other candidates, and the Post-Dispatch endorsed Antonio French. And that whole mockery, look, they don't like Tashara Jones. They've campaigned against her pretty much since she took office. Who should be surprised that they nominated Jeffrey Boyd, who is, quite frankly, just out there as the powers that be flak jacket that don't like anybody. So they use him and run him and just use him any way they can. So I'm not surprised, by that at all. It's okay. Like, she knew it, I knew it, everybody knew it, that the Post was going to endorse Jeffrey Boyd. So,
let me just throw in, when you're talking about endorsements, while Dr. Suggs in the American endorsed Tashara, and the Post endorsed Antonio French, Congressman Clay endorsed Jeffrey Boyd.
Okay. But he did not. Now, Jeffrey Boyd said that Clay endorsed him for treasurer this go round, and Clay immediately said, like, I did no such thing. So, I mean, how crazy is that?
Can I say
that was a head scratcher. That was weird.
First of all, I don't think endorsements mean, they never meant as much as people thought they did. Now they mean very little, I think. And in fact, we're probably tripling the Post audience tonight by talking about it. And I don't get the sense anymore, and I could be wrong about this, that there's the old-fashioned deal where there's a whole bunch of people around sitting around with their pipes in an editorial meeting at the Post-Dispatch. It's sort of one guy writing the editorials, and this is first of all, I think
two guys, right?
Okay, great. I think Tashara Jones has done a good job as treasurer, so I don't agree with the Post. But more important, this isn't like this contract. There doesn't really seem to be any there. It doesn't seem when I've asked a bunch of folks all over the place, and I can't really. This is not something where the Post has been doing story after story, and Tony Messenger has been doing columns and all this stuff. This is really kind of out of nowhere. And
yeah, but
I don't see
do you
this
think
as a big deal.
should someone getting a contract with a political entity be contributing to the person who helps decide where?
But
that
now
contract
she
goes?
explained if that was in the pipes before she even actually came to the office, or there was a lengthy explanation by her like several months ago about that. Okay,
I know.
Now whether you buy it or not, but let me throw this in real quick.
And that's the key point, whether I buy it or not, because we talk about this in the county. Steve Stenger is spending time at the Gray Bar Motel over this, Alvin.
So you think Tashara Jones should go to prison?
No,
so you just said that Tashara Jones should go to prison.
I did not say that.
All
I
right,
do believe that if you have a contract with an entity like the county, you should not be contributing money to.
Do you understand that we'd have to cancel practically every city, county, and county contract there is?
Or we would eliminate the contributions.
No, you would have to right now, for what your little standard you just came up with, probably every city and county contractor is going, we're gone. I mean,
let's do it.
What about the contributions? Like you said,
Charlie. This isn't. It's like some of the stuff. This isn't utopia. The point is, the contract, from what I can tell, is going to cut out Xerox as the middleman and actually save the taxpayers a bunch of money. It is. There's nothing. It's passed muster across the board. There's absolutely no appearance or suggestion of impropriety by her. It's just not.
Well, that's
I think it's overstated, Ray. I mean, and I'm not saying that Tashara Jones should live by a standard that nobody else lives by, but to say that there's nothing there and it passes all muster, I don't think that's quite the case.
Hey, Phil, you're going to have the last word. The birthday boy has the last word because we're flat out of time, but we will be back in just a moment with Mike Shannon, the voice of the Cardinals, who's going to join us for Donnybrook Part 2.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network. Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.
Well, Donnybrook, we have a special treat for the second half of our program tonight as we welcome the voice of the St. Louis Cardinals, the man who's been in the broadcast booth since 1972. After a great career playing on 3 Cardinal World Series teams, Mike Shannon, who, of course, is also a local restaurateur at Lambert Airport as well as Edwardsville. And last night, Mike, well, first of all, welcome to Donnybrook. Thank you very much for gracing us with your presence. How are you?
Thank you very much, Charlie. I've been a big fan going way back, okay, because I'm a St. Louis. You can't have St. Louis without Donnybrook, period.
Well, hey, thank you.
Something tells me that might end up on a 9 Network promo. Okay, last night, no fans in the stands. Reminded me a little bit of growing up in Cleveland as an Indians fan. But what was it like last night to call the exhibition game against the Royals with Mike Matheny as their manager with nobody in the stands?
Well, the only thing that I regret about this season is the fact that I can't go down and talk to the players and the managers and the coaches, okay, because I have friends there. And now we're not allowed to do that. You can't. I have a pass that just allows me on the 3rd floor, which is the broadcast floor. And if you have a number of MLB's running everything. And first of all, I'll say something rather provocative about Major League Baseball. You know, they come into your house and they want to tell you what to do. They don't know where the bathroom is. They don't know where the bedroom is, the kitchen, anything. But yet they come into your house and they want to tell you how to run it. So I disagree with them right off. And I used to tell Bud Selig that, who was a friend of mine. I said, Bud, you can't do this stuff. And so consequently, I'd do everything that was wrong. You know, you're supposed to wear your badge. So they'd warn him. I said, now listen, there'll be one guy come down here and he doesn't wear a badge or anything. He said, just let him go. Don't pay anything. And I love Bud Selig. And I think Bud Selig is going to go down as the greatest baseball commissioner in the history of the game. And I think he might go down as one of the greatest commissioners, period, no matter football, baseball, or basketball, or what.
Alvin?
Alvin Reid, your Fairmount Park buddy here. Man, I'm surely missing it over there. Hopefully sometime soon we can all be back over there watching the horses. I just want to ask you, you know, how's your restaurant doing over in Edwardsville? And just, you know, what are you missing? I know the ponies are going to be part of it, but what are you missing most throughout all of this?
You've been there. Now you need to go into my horse racing room. That's my favorite room. There is one horse over there with a rider, okay, and it's a thoroughbred, and there are only two like that in the world. One is in Mike Shannon's in Edwardsville, and the other's in Dubai.
Okay.
Now a friend of mine had the one that was here, and he gave it to me. So when I built the restaurant, I had to reinforce everything with the steel and so forth. But a friend of mine is Gary Stevens, okay? He's really a friend of my son's who lives out there and lives next to him. But I know Gary, and this guy, he's a Hall of Fame rider, and he's ridden Kentucky Derby. I mean, he's just one of the greatest riders in the history of the world. And he has sent me a bunch of things. He's also an actor. He was in that great film of what was the name of that film?
Horse racing, or
what's that?
I don't know.
The horse that back in the 30s that came from behind.
Oh, Seabiscuit.
Oh, Seabiscuit.
That's correct. Thank you, Dave, because there was a female a writer that wrote that story. I might know you would know. But anyway, it's a great book and it's a great movie. It's phenomenal, and he was the writer in that great story, in that great movie.
Cool.
Right? But he has sent me so many things. And there was a lady in the other day. She said, "Whose pants are those?" And I said, "They're Gary Stevens' pants. It is when he was a writer, you know."
Wow. Ray Hartmann
in the movie. Yeah. Now you're going back, Charlie. Ray Hartmann. That's
you know what?
He's original.
You know, this is Donnybrook, so we want to get into some meat of the issue here. First of all, I want to thank you for the 64, 67, 68 World Series. I'd rather talk to you about it as an old ball player. How bad were the Cubs in the 60s?
You know, that's a funny thing. We go in there now, and it's a packed house. But I can remember going in there in the 60s, and there'd only be 5,000 or 6,000 people there. In fact, I'll tell you there's two funny stories about Wrigley Field. The best one is Musial's last trip around, okay? And, of course, I knew Stan because I played with his son in football at CBC. And so, consequently, he was just one of my teammates' fathers, okay? So I'd go over to his house, and, of course, it was Stan Musial. We all knew that. But anyway, I go to play. He's making his last round, and so they make a big deal out of it because he's one of the greatest players in history. So anyway, Johnny Keane, who's the manager, comes to me before the game and said, "Hey, Stan's not feeling good, and so he's not going to play today. You're going to play left field." So I go out to left field, and there's a guy in the bleachers, and I really felt sorry for him. He said, "Hey, Shannon," he says, "where's Musial?" I said, "Well, he's not playing today." He said, "You mean I drove 790 miles to watch you play left field?" And the poor guy, he had his 10-year-old son with him. And, he's telling that kid that for 790 miles, he's probably just bombarding him with Musial stories, okay? It was hilarious. I said, "Man, I'm sorry. I really felt sorry for the guy.
Yeah.
He drove 790 miles to watch Musial play his last game, and he had to watch me play left field." I was thrilled to play left field, though. So about the third inning, I went up, and Stan was taking a rest on the training table. I said, "Stan, you got to do me a favor." I told him the story, and he signed the ball for me, and I threw the ball up to the guy, and he was, "All right, come on, Shannon, let's go."
Hey, Bill.
Well, Mike, I was one of those 5,000 or 6,000 people at Wrigley Field in the 60s. And I grew up with this love of traditional baseball, under God's own light on God's own grass. I was upset when Wrigley Field put lights in, and now I'm upset with the designated hitter coming to National League, and even more outraged at this notion that in an extra inning game, they're going to start with a runner on second. I share my outrage.
Yeah, I saw it the other day for the first time. We had a inter squad game, and they went and they played the 10th inning. And they put a guy on second base. He scored, by the way.
Well, do you think that's good?
You know what? And I realize you're a traditionalist, but you know what Satchel Paige used to say? Don't look back. Someone might be gaining on you.
Right. I get that.
That's the way I look at it. Okay. I'm more thrilled about this season than any other because of all the new rules. I mean, it's going to be, they're calling it a dash and they're calling it this and it's a sprint and so forth and so on. But it's still, you got to hit it, you got to pitch it, you got to catch it, and you got to throw it. Period. They can change all they want, but they haven't changed 90 feet to the bases. The pitcher's mound's still the same, batter's box, all that stuff is still the same. And, I had a guy at the restaurant over in Edwardsville, Charlie, and he came up to me and he was a young kid. He said, "Hey, Mr. Shannon, I did this or I did that." I said, "You know what?" I said, "They call a guy up from AAA. They give him an opportunity. If he doesn't produce, they send him back to AAA. So get out." I mean, that's what sports is. You either hack it or you don't hack it. And in this business we're in, it's alive. Just like this show here, it's alive, and it just is what it is. And then that's what baseball is going to be this year. It's going to be is what it is, and whoever can acclimate to it, and it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait till tomorrow night. By the way, the Pittsburgh Manager is a guy that was born in where SIU Carbondale. He was born in Carbondale.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Is it Derek Shelton? Is that his name?
That is correct. Who said that? You, Charlie?
Believe it or not. But yeah, he's a local guy. So we had a few local. Dick Williams is from here. Earl Weaver, and the manager of the Indians. He lived in St. Louis for a while as well. There are a few.
I played with his father. Yeah. Yeah. And he was a heck of a player. He hurt himself right here, is where he received that injury, or he had.
Really?
Yeah.
Channel 9.
It ruined his career as a player, but it started a career as a great manager.
Mm-hmm. Wendy?
Mike, so many of us in the absence of baseball have been watching old games on YouTube, and we were wondering if you and any of your other, your fellow players, do you ever sign on to YouTube to watch your old games? Because they are amazing and so entertaining. But we were trying to figure out, hey, does Mike watch those old games? So do you?
No, well, if I'm watching TV and it comes on, I watch it. But
yeah,
people will tell me, say, "Hey, I watched you on TV last night." I said, "Yeah, I wasn't on TV last night." "Oh yeah, you were." They had the '64 World Series on.
Right.
I got to tell you a funny story about the '64 World Series. There was a guy named Lefty. He was here and he worked out at Red Shandine's villa, and he played in the Yankee organization. He's a left-handed batter. So anyway, he quit his minor league career and he went into the business of he was a bricklayer. His father was a bricklayer, and he came over from the old country, and he was a bricklayer. He started carrying hod when he was like 12 years old. But anyway, we're playing the Yankees, and so he comes out and he bets his whole week's salary on the first game. And I hit a home run off of Whitey Ford. He said, "You're not that good." I said, "Lefty, what do you want me to do?" He hung a curveball. I said, "I got, he threw a couple sliders inside and he missed, and then he hung one." And I said, "What do you want me to do? Miss it?" He did. He said, "You weren't that good." I said, "Well, we beat him."
Hey, Mike, when you entered the radio broadcast booth in 1972, you were following some big footsteps. Harry Carey had been in it. Jack Buck was in it. Joe Garagiola had been in it. Was that pretty intimidating? How did you feel doing that?
No, it wasn't intimidating because I'll tell you why, Charlie. Because I used to take over for Stan Musial. And then
okay.
Yeah,
enough said.
Yeah. So now, and it's like when Big Mac was going for the home run record. people said, "What are you going to say?" I said, "I have no idea what I'm going to say." You mean you don't plan? I said, "No." And it was a good thing I didn't plan because in number 7 he hit a line drive and just sneaked into the left field corner. I said, "You don't have time to think." I said, "Everything I do is just it comes, you know." And consequently, I said, and they say, "Are you nervous?" I said, "No." I said, "I was nervous when the bases were loaded and I was facing Koufax. That's when I was nervous." So, I mean, basically, once you're on the field, everything, there's no comparison to that. I know it's hard to say, but it's it is what it is.
Hey, speaking of the field, Mike, now you could have played football. What led to your decision that I'm going to go for it playing baseball as opposed to seeking a professional football career?
Money. No, it was true. Football had just not come into its own yet. Baseball had, and they had the pension plan. They had so much more to offer than the National Football League had to offer. Now it's a little different, you know. They're signing guys to contracts with big money, and they're free agents. So they've caught up. Let's put it that way. But at the time that and this is back in 1958. You know, I tell these stories now, and and I said that's 60 years ago. Like in the Musial story in left field, that guy says, "I felt so sorry for that guy driving 790 miles. He came from Iowa, and he wanted to see Musial play." I said, "Well, he should have moved to Chicago."
Did you have a favorite? Did you, if let's say all money was the same, would you have played football, or did you like baseball better?
Well, no. If it was today, and I had to make a decision, it'd be a little different.
Okay.
But see, Joe Namath was a guy that came out and he I don't know if he could play baseball or not, but he took the football route, and so that would have been my time there.
Yeah, what would have happened if the Cardinals had taken Joe Namath? You know, or if Joe Namath had gone to St. Louis. Of course, he went to the Jets instead, right? I'm sorry, Ray, I stepped on your line there. It's your turn.
Well, no, I was just 2 or 3 years early. That's all.
There you go. Hey, Mike, $450,000, and people were upset that he made too much money.
Well, here's a good example. When I was a player, I voted 3 different times for players to come along. In other words, it cost me money each time I voted because I voted. But that was for thousands of dollars. How would you like to be with these poor guys? You come home and you tell your wife, "Hey, hon, I just voted against my $5 million salary to not play." Get your tail back down there and revote. I want my $5 million, man. I mean, they really had a tough decision to make, you know.
Yeah.
And you say, "Well, yeah, I'd like to have that, decision to make too." You know, it's billionaires and millionaires, okay? But hey, let me tell you something. Everybody has their problems. It doesn't matter how much money you have.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. So, Mike, I guess you had the most fun playing in the Gas House King, right? That was just getting back at you for a little shot at me.
Okay. I know.
I want to ask you a serious question.
Okay.
You played with, I'm curious, each sport, today's athletes sort of talk in a different way about those that came before them. And I wondered, do you feel as a player, I do want to ask 2 questions. I got in trouble with McClellan for this before, but I want to know what you remember of Curt Flood, because you played with him.
You know what I remember before Curt Flood? I remember Bill White. And Bill White was on that team. Bill White, Bob Gibson, and Curt Flood. And, of course, the great writer who ran off the road up in Oregon, he was going to go, who wrote the book 64?
Frank,
Charles Halberstam.
Say it again.
It was Charles.
David
Halberstam. Yes. Great book. Great book.
Yeah, and but anyway, it was about the civil rights back then. Okay.
Well, the reason I was asking about Curt Flood is you talked about salaries, and do you think that your generation of players has been treated well in retrospect by the current, because you guys played for a whole lot less money? And I
blame it on my father. If he'd have waited 2 or 3 years, it would have been a different story. If he wouldn't have met my mother for 20 years, then I'd have those decisions.
I guess what I was asking about is what Curt Flood did was a pretty pretty brave thing at the time when he took on free agency and stuff. How do you remember that era?
It was at the time it was very controversial, as you might expect, but he was not the guy that really broke the reserve clause. Right. It was the pitcher for Atlanta at the time, and it was some lawyer that, you know, the reserve clause had been into effect for 50, 60, 100 years. I don't know how long. But anyway, there was a lawyer. That's why, you know, they say a contract is not a contract. Any contract can be, you know, an ironclad contract. There's no such thing. He took one little clause, and he took one sentence out of that clause, and that's what changed all of baseball and what free agency. So, you know, and Flood at the time, you know, he said, and you know, you can go back and read the quotes, and I'm sure you have those quotes that he was, you know, treated like a slave, and nobody wanted to hear $100,000 ball players saying he was a slave or that he was picked on. Okay, we wanted a white guy with like 9 kids and who was making the minimum. That's who we wanted to challenge the reserve clause. So we'd have public sentiment on our side, but Kurt was adamant about it. That's the way he felt, and he fought the reserve clause, and he is credited for that, and rightly so, because it cost him a lot of money. And I can tell you a story of not on the air but off the air why he wound up in Mallorca, Spain.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about it off the air. I wasn't asking on the race side because I was just curious because some sports, like in basketball, you hear them honoring that we stood on so and so's shoulders more. I don't hear that as much in baseball, and I just wondered what you thought, because a lot of people today, they're where they are to where guys like you were in the 60s, I think.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was fortunate. I was so fortunate to come along at the time I came along, you know, and you can say, well, if I'd been later, I'd had the option of football and so forth and so on. And I really enjoyed football because I'd come up to the line and I'd know what everyone was going to do before they knew it. Okay, that was fun for me, and that's what quarterbacks were. But a quarterback today, man, he has to stay at the stadium and watch film for hours and hours. I mean, it's a different game nowadays than it was. But you just think of the fellas that I got to compete against: Henry Aaron, Willie Mays. I mean, the list goes on and on. These guys are legends. Okay, sure. And so I have no complaints whatsoever. I mean, there were times when I didn't want to face Koufax or Drysdale, but I didn't have any choice, man. Get out there. When you cross those white lines, that's the great thing about athletics, you know. You know, if you fall down or you get knocked down, you better get up, otherwise they'll trample you. I mean, they'll run right over you, period. I mean, athletics can teach you a lot of things.
Mike, you talk, you know, when you were a super athlete, the super athletes were all going into baseball, and now they're going into all different sports. And I think of the eras, and I think like one of the great teams of all time to me was the 1969 Cubs. You know, and they had Santo and Banks and Holtzman and Fergie Jenkins. And how do you think a team like that, or your 64, 68 Cardinals, how would they do now if you took that 69 Cubs or the 68 Cardinals and put them in the National League in 2020? How would they do?
They would do. You know, I never compare one era to another era. I don't think you can do that. But are you telling me that Willie Mays couldn't play today? Come on.
Well, of course I'm not saying that.
Well, yeah, but I mean, but if you think of it about that way, or Henry Aaron couldn't play, or this guy Bob Gibson couldn't pitch today, or Bill White couldn't play today. They were great athletes. Okay, you know, one of the things that I'm most proud of, and I never will forget. I asked Maris. He said, I couldn't believe that nobody broke that record, and it took that many years. Now, when I was in high school, I was the player of the year in basketball and football in the same year. And that record has stood for over 60 years. Nobody's broken it. And I don't think it will be broken, because nowadays what you say is that they specialize, okay? Mm-hmm. Now, if you're a doctor or you're a lawyer, you have to be specific. And you know, if you go look for this particular kind of a heart doctor, okay, let's go for a doctor or a brain doctor, okay? you go to a specialist, all right? And I think now athletes are the same. You either play basketball or football or baseball. There's very seldom to play all three. And there's advantages to that. I never will forget, I'd go from football to basketball, and I think I'd be in shape. Man, I'm telling you, I would be so sore getting Charlie horses and everything from going from basketball. And then I'd play on the CYC team and the high school team, when you're a freshman. You just play. You love playing. That's all it is. You just enjoy playing, period.
Mike, you moved so seamlessly from the game to the booth. Did you realize before you made that move that you would be such a natural, that the fans would love you so very, very much? And what's the best piece of advice that Jack Buck ever gave you?
Well, first of all, Wendy, thank you very much. That's fine. And I never did think of that. Okay. Now, when I was a youngster, I used to listen to Harry Carey. Now, if you took the radio to the ball game and you were watching the same game that Harry was broadcasting, you say, what the hell game is he doing? but if you were down in Potosi, Missouri and listening to the game, he had you on the edge of your seat. I mean, he was phenomenal. That was his technique. That was the way he did the game. And so my advice to anyone, I said, just be yourself. And that's what I've been all these times. I just, it's like somebody said, do you prepare? I said, yeah, I prepare because I know the game. But when I come into the booth, I don't carry a bunch of books or anything because I think that people want to know what's going on down on the field. That's what my job is as a reporter. I have to describe to that person that's not at the game what's happening. And the greatest compliment that I get is from the visually impaired when they write me letters and they say, I love to go to the game. I bring my radio and I know what's happening because you describe it so well. Now that's the biggest compliment as far as I'm concerned.
I'm going to jump in here, Mike. My grandmother, who lived in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and that's where my mom and her siblings are from. She lost her sight at a pretty early age. Could play the piano and could do so many things. And you guys, I'm gonna start crying. You guys used to say hi to her every year and say Grace Wiley is listening to you did a different town every night and you'd say whatever the station was and you would say hi to my grandmother in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. And I'll never forget that, man. I'll never forget that. That's a true story.
It's phenomenal that how many people that they actually, their life is hooked to the radio broadcast of the baseball game. They set their clocks by it. Their day is run by it. Okay. And I'm talking about mostly the people that are not here in St. Louis. They're in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and they're in Memphis, Tennessee, and da-da-da-da-da-da. Now, and you have to understand about KMOX, okay? That was the Cardinals were the first team west of the Mississippi.
Yeah.
And because of KMOX, they took a survey at one time. The KMOX at night went into 46 states and 6 Canadian provinces. Well, now, because of all the technical advances we've made, I mean, I have guys from, well, I'll give you one example. There was a 3-star general. He happened to be a colonel at the time, but he called me in the booth. He's a big Cardinal fan. He called me back. I said, "Where are you, Colonel?" He said, "I'm in Afghanistan." And he said, "I have the game pumped in for my troops." All right.
Wow. That's...
So I mean, and then now I used to get letters on ships that go around Cape Horn. Now because of the computer, these guys in Iowa, the farmers, they go out, they turn the computer on, they listen to the game while they're working at night with the tractor. It's phenomenal.
Mike, we got about a minute to go. Can you handicap the 2020 Cardinals?
If anybody tells you they can handicap the 2020 season, run as fast as you can, Charlie. As fast as you can, get away from it. So, there's only, I'm going to tell you my biggest concern, okay? And I'll tell the manager this tomorrow, and I told him this last year. Everybody says the pitching is great. The pitching is great. You know what they say? And I told him this last year. I said, I'm concerned about your pitching. And he looked at me like, what do you mean? Everybody tells me my pitching is the best. And it's good. I said, you have quantity, but how about the quality? give me the Dodger pitching staff in the 60s with Koufax and Drysdale and Osteen, and then you went up. I'm telling you what, Charlie, we were the first team in that 60s that went to the West Coast and won all 7 games. Because you would face Hall of Fame pitchers almost every night. Okay, you'd go Koufax and Drysdale and Sutton or Osteen or one.
Mike, we're going to have to hold it there because the unforgiving clock says our time is up. But we're going to get a meal at Shannon's. We're going to listen to you on KMOX, and we say go Cardinals.
Okay.
And
Thank
happy
you,
birthday to Bill McClellan. Thank you, Mike Shannon. Happy birthday, Bill. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next week at this time.
Please come back, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks,
All
Mike.
right, guys. Thank you, guys.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.